recording has started. Welcome to the Poverty and Homelessness Board Executive Meeting. I'm going to take a moment to ask people who are present to identify themselves and indicate whether or not you are a voting member of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. I am Pat Farr. I am one of the co-vice chairs, and in Brittany Quickwarner's absence, I will be handling the gavel until Brittany tells me not to. To my right is...
Hi, I'm Kate Mudd. I'm the interim Human Services Division Manager today. Just for folks to know, the position itself that Karen Sachs vacated a few weeks ago is now open on the Lane County website. And so if you or someone you know might be interested in the HSD Division Manager role, please take a look.
I'm Carly Walker, the HMIS supervisor. I'm not a voting member. Brianna Rogers, program services coordinator with HSD, and I oversee anti-poverty and homelessness prevention programs and contracts. I'm not a voting member.
Katie Whitaker, homeless services supervisor. Actually, I'm going to stand over here because I don't see myself on the camera. Just to be polite. Hi, and I am not a voting member. It's good to be here.
Matthias Smith, I am the formerly homeless/homeless youth representative, and I am a voting member.
And folks who are on not video but audio, I'll call you out by name from the top. In fact, Kate, would you call them out by name? You have the control of the...
Indeed. Dan.
Dan Bryant, Square One Villages, not a voting member.
Thanks, Dan. Rosie.
Sorry, what was the question? I just got in.
Dr. Foster.
Dr. Willie Foster, healthcare representative, voting member.
Aaron.
Aaron with the
Thanks, Aaron. We cut up a little bit.
oh, sorry. I was just saying staff with the city of Springfield.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah,
Chris McAllister.
Chris McAllister, Vice Chair of Homelessness, Lived Experience seat.
Thank you. Mayor Venice.
Lucy Venice, Mayor of Eugene, voting member.
Teresa Boudreau.
Teresa Boudreau, Whitebird Clinic's Nest program, not a voting member.
Thank you. Vinny.
Vinny Zerati, Sexual Assault Support Services Advocate, not a voting member.
Thanks, Vinny. Joseph.
Joseph Beal, Eugene Mission, non-voting member.
Heather.
Heather Quasanza, Community Supported Shelters, non-voting member.
Terry.
Terry Shea, Direct Services Representative from HIV Alliance.
C. Cronin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hava Cronin. I'm the housing specialist for Head Start of Lane County. I'm observing this meeting to learn as much as I can learn. Thank you.
Welcome. Brittany, welcome.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Brittany Quickwarner, Eugene Chamber Chair this year, but I apologize. I'm sitting at the airport waiting for a flight, so I'm not going to be much of a chair today. So thank you, Kate.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Farr as well. Mayor Van Gordon.
Yes.
Just introduce yourself, please.
I literally just got it come up. Sean Van Gordon, Mayor of Springfield.
Thank you. And then I have an iPhone identification. And then I also have a number ending in 9990.
Hi, Kate. This is Amanda Noble Flannery from the city of Eugene, she, her pronouns.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. Catherine. And Catherine, if you're speaking, you're very faint.
Sorry, I just hopped on. I'm guessing we're doing intro.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Catherine, Ryan, she, her. I'm with the Lane County Pacific Source CCO.
Thank you, Catherine. Susan.
Hi, sorry, Susan Lopez, ODHS Child Welfare, she, her pronouns.
Peter?
Good afternoon, Peter Chavan, City of Eugene Homeless Services.
Thank you. Mike Fleck.
Hi, Mike Fleck, Cottage Grove City Council, the rural representative voting member.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone that, Lori Peralt.
Hi, Lori Peralt, Catholic Community Services.
Thank you. Tracy Bishop.
Hi, Tracy Bishop, Lane County staff, not a member.
Great. Is there anyone else who we have not called out yet?
Bob Teeters, Isla Outreach Services over in Florence, not a voting member.
Thank you, Bob. All right. I believe we have everyone spoken for.
Thank you, Kate. And Chair Quick Warner, in your absence, I have assumed the gavel in my hand, which I will relinquish to you unless you would like me to continue to hold the gavel.
If you are willing, I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Pat.
Then I will do that, and I'll defer to you at any point you wish to grab the role of the chair, Chair Quick Warner. So as a vice chair, I'll handle the gavel. We do have, for the purpose of this meeting, we do have a quorum. The voting members of this meeting are the members of the executive committee. And as we go through queues, members of the executive committee will be called on first. But whenever I run a meeting, anybody in the meeting really is eligible to get in the queue. So please do not hesitate to raise your hand in the queue, and as time permits, we will entertain all comments. We have no action items on the agenda today. It's mostly it's strictly presentation and reports, including a PowerPoint presentation, which we'll be stepping into momentarily. Very quickly, for the voting members of the executive committee, do you have any items that you'd like to bring forward before the committee as items of interest or comments? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move down the agenda. We have a land acknowledgement, and Ms. Budd, do you have the verbiage for the land acknowledgement at hand?
I do. I'm glad to do that, Brittany, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, go for it. Thanks.
Great. We would like to acknowledge that our office here at 1132 Lawrence sits on the homelands of the Kalapuya people. In the treaties of 1851 and 1854 to 1855, and the subsequent forced removals of many Indian people from the Western Oregon, some of the Kalapuya were moved to the Grand Ronde Reservation and some were moved to the Siletz Reservation. It is important to note that all of Lane County was an important trading and gathering area for camas and other resources. During the Restoration era from 1977 to 1989, Lane County was designated as the service area for the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Indians, and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and Coquille Indian Tribe, and the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians. We acknowledge that descendants of the original and the service area inhabitants of the land are still here today. They are thriving members of our community. Countless members of other tribes now also call our community their home. We wish to thank those original stewards of the land. We as fellow stewards of this land wish to remember that we need to take good care of the land and take good care of all the members of our community. I'd like to thank the Eugene 4J School District for sharing this particular land acknowledgement.
Let's take a moment to absorb that and think about it. And thank you, Ms. Budd, for reading that out loud. So we'll move down the agenda. We have as item 3. I'm going to mention that if we didn't have a quorum, typically some meetings do not move forward with agendas if they don't have a quorum. This meeting, if we did not have a quorum, we would continue with the agenda. Despite a non-voting quorum, we would not act on any action items. And I misguided you. We do have a single action item today, which is the next item on the agenda, which is our consent calendar. Yeah, before us a consent calendar, which includes minutes and a February financial statement. Any of the items that had been wished to be pulled from the consent calendar for a separate discussion would have been pulled so prior to this, prior to the motion. Any items that we are considering on the consent calendar are available in today's agenda packet. So with that, from the voting members, do I have a motion to accept the consent calendar?
I'll motion.
Second.
Excuse me?
I said second.
Moved by Matthias Smith and seconded by Vice Chair McAllister. Discussion to the motion. I see none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Passes 6-0 unanimously. But I will call any opposed. That would have been weird because you all said aye. So it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we'll move down the agenda to item number 4, one we've all been waiting for, which is an update on the all-in Lane County. It's all in Lane County because we all live in Lane County. It's not necessarily, it's not just Lane County that this is for. And I'm going to say a couple of minutes about what all in means and what it does. And from my perspective, it's a really particularly exciting moment in time for us to be right here where we are today, because we're taking the work of a number of different commissions in the past, a number of different agencies and jurisdictions, and finding a way to consolidate them into a single mission and a single path forward. That's what all in means to me. And we're in the middle of the process right now. And today, Ms. Budd will give us I'm going to predict a wonderful PowerPoint, one that will be distributed to everybody subsequent to the meeting. So before we go to the PowerPoint, Ms. Budd, I'll ask for the voting members anything you'd like to add or ask prior to this agenda item. No. Very well. Then we will move forward. Kate, please.
Thank you. And Diana, we need to swap sharing screens. So if you don't mind taking yours down, beautiful, then I can put mine up.
Rosie, you don't know this, but you have the big screen in front of us today. So hi, how are you doing? You and I
I'm doing pretty good. Sorry.
No, it's not you that did that.
Try a window, and then do you have the PowerPoint open? I do.
Am I fine now?
You were fine before. You and I have been playing phone tag a little bit. Let's see if immediately following this meeting, if I can give you a call and we can solve that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That screen. Share. And then pull up the PowerPoint.
We're waiting for technical issues to come forward. I think we're just about ready for that.
Every computer does it slightly differently.
Isn't that weird?
There we go.
It's a strange IT world we live in.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for your patience as we work through our IT challenges, and thanks to Commissioner Farr, who has agreed to be the liaison between the MAC group and the Poverty and Homelessness Board as we move forward. And so just as a quick review, on January 10th, Governor Kotek declared an emergency due to homelessness in the state of Oregon, specifically focusing on the 7 continuums of care that are regional, and sought to provide additional dollars to those continuums in order to help progress very clear outcomes that she would like to see achieved as a part of this emergency. And so every community was tasked to create a MAC group, which stands for Multi-Agency Coordinating Group. The way that the timeline has worked out, we had about a month to go from creating a MAC group to having a full-fledged plan to submit to the state. So for those of you who have been involved with the MAC group, you know that there have been meetings each week since that group was established, with a great deal of work to do, not only in those meetings, but also during the interim. So thank you so much for the extra time and energy that you shared with us to make this plan a reality, which I'll share in a moment. So today, what I want to walk you through is to give you an update around the community plan related frequently asked questions that the state has shared, which helps to shape the work that we're doing here locally. And then also to share with you the plan itself that has been submitted to the states, and then the next steps that we foresee coming in the next few months. Here is a timeline that illustrates all the work that has been done since the governor's declaration. Starting on February 22nd, that was the first time the MAC group met. And those 20 plus individuals came together. They reviewed baseline homeless management information system data to really be able to target into, who is most greatly affected by homelessness in our community, and how can we work together to try to decrease the number of people in those populations, as well as just overall the number of people who are houseless in our community. Then the 3 task groups met in the next week. And so there are a task group identified for each of the outcomes that the governor has asked us to work on. One focused on preventing the number of people who are falling into houselessness. A second focused on emergency shelter and creating additional beds. And then the third focused on moving people who are currently unsheltered in our community into permanent housing. And so those task groups met and really just talked about additional ideas as to what can be, potentially proposed as a part of the plan. And those ideas then were brought back to the MAC group, where that group utilized a decision-making lens to help determine what specific actions ought to move forward in the plan, as well as bringing some of their ideas to the table. Then on March 7th, I presented to the Lane County Commissioners, and during that meeting, the county administrator was delegated the authority to execute and sign required documents related to the all-in effort. That allows for greater expediency once things start rolling, when the plan's been accepted and the state is seeking to execute grant agreements with Lane County. The commissioners also approved acceptance of up to $30 million of all-in funding. And that also lends itself to being able to move quickly, so that once we have a full understanding of how much money we're going to receive from the state, we can just move that forward through the contracting process, as opposed to needing to go back to the county commissioners. The MAC group met for the 3rd time on March 8th. At that point, they reviewed a draft plan, as well as other draft templates that the state was requiring. There was robust conversation in that meeting. Additional changes as well as additions to the plan was made as a part of that meeting. And then the revision was shared then the evening of March 8th, and the MAC members then voted as to whether they would approve for the plan to be submitted to the state. During that same time on March 9th, the plan documents were shared with a number of stakeholder groups, including the Poverty and Homelessness Board, League, the YHGP coordinating group, as well as Play, which is a youth focused group of those who have experienced houselessness or are currently houseless. Finally, on March 10th, the plan was submitted to the state. And with previous timelines, the state has indicated that they will kind of approve the plans by March 17th. I will share that it is March 16th, and I have not heard a peep from the state yet. So I'm not optimistic that our plan will be approved by tomorrow, but I could be surprised. So this is just a great illustration of the great amount of work that has occurred in order to get us to where we are today. The timeline was in no way ideal. I think we would have liked far more time to be more inclusive and to really be able to have further conversations. But unfortunately, it was the state timeline that we needed to work within. And so we're able to make it happen and really did bring in a number of different stakeholder groups and individuals, which I certainly appreciate and value. So we have learned a few things since the last time the PHB convened related to the all-in plan. And so I wanted to make sure that this group was up to speed on the significant kind of additional pieces of information coming from the state. The first is that the state has specified all of the all-in funding will flow through Lane County. There was question as to kind of how the dollars would flow into communities. And so this clarifies that question. Also wanted to share that there's a frequently asked questions page on the Oregon Housing and Community Services website that is regularly updated with additional information. And so if you're someone who is interested in kind of being as up to speed as I might be, for example, feel free to check out this FAQ page. Chris, do you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Just point of clarity. At one of the meetings where we got the technical assistance, it was said that there might be agencies or entities that would be direct contracting with the government for some of this. Is that no longer the case?
So correct in that there will not be agencies that will be receiving all-in funding directly from the state.
Okay, thank you.
I will share that the state, as a part of the $130 million package, also has dollars that are directed specifically to culturally responsive agencies. And those may still flow from the state to the local level, but are not a part of the all-in plan that we submitted to the state.
So if I may, Kate, that is different to the Measure 110 money that's being distributed, which much of that is going directly to what's called BRNs, BHRNs, or direct service agencies.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing is at this point in time, there are numerous additional resources that we're seeing come into our community. And so very much an opportunity, especially to partner with the new Measure 110 programming. I know personally I've been working to stay as up to date as I can regarding those additional resources. So this is another key frequently asked question, and it's related to the definition of emergency shelter. You may be aware in our community that we have a designation between emergency shelters and alternative shelters. And an alternative shelter is one that doesn't meet the emergency shelter definition. And as a part of all-in, funds can be used to increase infrastructure within an alternative shelter in order to reach the threshold of emergency shelter. So for example, if we have an alternative shelter that may have structures that people are living in, but those structures don't include heat or electricity, all-in funding can be used to put heat and electricity, of course, if it's safe, into structures. And if that's all that's needed to meet the emergency shelter definition, then it allows for that alternative shelter to then become an emergency shelter and also can be counted toward the outcome of creating additional emergency shelter beds. And so that is something that is built into our proposed plan to the state, in that we would improve certain alternative shelters in our community to become new emergency shelter beds. Community supported shelters could be an example. Yes, and we definitely.
Thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, it could be, and I think that what we would take a look at is there a possibility of kind of improving the shelters, for example, to reach that emergency shelter threshold. So another key frequently asked question is around whether emergency shelters that exist today could, be improved somehow and be counted as a new emergency shelter bed. And the answer from the state is no. That if there's a shelter, whether it's, a village with separate structures or it's a facility, and today it's counted as an emergency shelter, it cannot be considered new shelter for counting the all-in outcome progress. And so that certainly can be frustrating. Recognizing that we have dollars that are not sustaining into the future, that is supporting some of our emergency shelters, but it is the clear message coming from the state. I think you've got a big question. Sure.
And I'm sorry, I was trying to get onto Zoom so I could monitor the hands up. Do you mind monitoring hands up and calling the queue?
Yeah.
Thank you, Carl.
Chris's hand's been up for a while and then Mayor.
Okay. Chris, do you have another question?
I've removed my hand. I'm sorry.
Okay. Mayor Venice?
Yeah, I just a little clarification. So if we have an alternative shelter now that is eligible for the upgrade, and it's viable to upgrade it. Like I'm thinking about our 310 Garfield where people are living in their cars, but we're providing some heated shelter space and so on. So, so let me just answer the question. So if we have an alternative shelter now and it gets upgraded, that might count as added shelter beds because it then meets the definition.
Correct. And the message that we're getting is that it would. Yes.
Okay, but there's some things that we have thinking of what the city has set up, and 310 Garfield is the one that comes to mind because it's car camping with associated buildings with facilities. So where does that fit in the emergency shelter, or is that still considered alternative because people are living in vehicles of some sort?
Yeah, great question. And we actually have that question submitted to the state right now and have not received an answer yet. So we'll certainly let you know, especially the City of Eugene colleagues, as soon as we find out.
Right.
Any other questions? All right.
Let me check the chat one more time.
Hey, Kate, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, I can't find my hand raised button on my phone here. Well, I guess, can you guys give us more information on how many units you were anticipating you guys were counting in like an upgrade status? I mean, I guess I'm a little bit confused on, is that what we're using to count? Because I guess I just thought the governor's order really was trying to get folks off the streets and into shelter.
Yes, and actually, when I share more of the plan, you'll be able to see the specific numbers.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, your point is well taken. The governor's goal is very much to create brand new shelter. I think if we sat down and had a conversation with the governor, that being said, we also as a community, and this was a conversation in the MAC group, recognize that we have shelter today that is not kind of adequate in, you know, even in HUD's mind yet, because it doesn't meet the emergency shelter kind of minimums.
Okay.
And that need operational support today. And so by improving on the alternative shelters, it helps to meet both of those needs. And there are also actions in the plan that would create additional shelter beds. You know, notably around medical respite, for example, which we know has been a high interest for the PHB, for example, for quite a while.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And I'm now seeing that you have several more slides, so I'll hold tight on anything other questions.
All right, Mayor Van Gordon.
Actually, why don't we finish your slides and then.
Sure. And I will, someone asked about additional rationale, and I'm sharing the full FAQs. And so a lot of the rationale really just does revolve around the governor's interest in moving people from unsheltered homelessness into permanent housing. And that is very much what encompasses many of the responses to the FAQs. This is a good example of that, where the question is, if someone is residing in emergency shelter and they get permanently housed from that shelter, does it count toward the rehousing outcome? And based on the way the governor created the outcomes, the answer is no, because the focus is on moving people who are unsheltered into permanent housing. And so this is just, coming straight from the governor's office, and how our outcomes are going to be counted. And so we also, when we built the plan and as we move forward, we just need to be strategic in how we create programming so that we are indeed influencing the outcomes that we need to progress. So also wanted to share with you, I mentioned that we looked at the people in our system of services who are most greatly affected by houselessness. And what was shared from the Homeless Management Information System is that the three key populations are people with disabilities, people with gender identities that are not singularly male or female, and people whose race is Black, African American, American Indian, Alaska Native, or Indigenous. And that these folks are most likely to fall into houselessness than other populations of people. And you can see kind of the second bullets are the percentage of folks within our overall picture of people who are houseless that identify within those populations. And so there are efforts within the plan to help meet the needs of these specific populations, recognizing that if we're able to help support folks within these populations, then we're able to more effectively help all who are experiencing houselessness in the community. And this is also really valuable information for us to know within the community as a whole. So the next slide. This is just a summary of the ask that we made to the state as a part of our plan. We requested a total of $34 million. And that was higher than what the state predicted we would receive, but also done at the encouragement of technical assistance providers who said, yep, you should ask for what you need. And so we did just that. We also met the recommended number of households the state wanted us to serve for prevention. We doubled the amount of shelter beds that we were going to create, recognizing that the need is very high in our community for additional shelter beds, and then also met the number of rehousing programs that would be created. So more specifically, these are the specific action items that were sent to the state as a part of the plan. And these were identified as high priority supports that are needed and will also help us meet the outcome goals. The amount of money that is estimated at the top is based on the existing programs today. So for example, the prevention programs in our community are costing approximately $1,600 per household. And that includes admin, it includes the staffing costs as well as the actual rent assistance costs. And so when we were thinking about how much to ask for the state, we were using that figure to make sure that we were asking for an adequate amount of money. And so I'm not going to go through each of these details, but that you can see that they're spread out between prevention, emergency shelter, and then rehousing and street outreach. And that there are a few specific items that I hope you'll recognize as a part of the PHB strategic plan for this year. Medical respite is a great example. Another is additional outreach staff was a part of the strategic plan, as well as through the youth YHDP community coordinated plan, collaborative community plan. That also saw a few action items that were encompassed within this plan as well. So this is just a reminder of the state plan that was shared with us. Again, we're hoping we get the plan approved soon. And then also as soon as the legislature at the state approves the $130 million allocation, then we should see the dollars start flowing from the state. And the county is also actively right now just thinking through, how are we going to allocate the dollars, likely through some type of procurement process, and creating panels of programs that we can support with the different types of programs in the plan. So for the next steps, the MAC group has very kindly been willing to meet every other week at this point to get things moving and moving quickly. We're going to be looking at what specific work we can provide to the task groups to focus on. What are barriers to our success and how can we mitigate them, especially related to the 3 outcomes? And then what is it that we want to focus on first with the state's technical assistance providers in order to progress this work? We also, in Lane County, are right now determining if an emergency declaration due to homelessness will be implemented. There are conversations going on. The strength of doing something like that is it just provides additional flexibility and ability to move quickly, as we saw during the COVID crisis. And then lastly, the task groups are going to be meeting in early April, end of March, to start working on their specific action items determined by the MAC. And so if you are interested in joining one of the task groups, we have specific staff who are taking the lead, and we'll be glad, as follow-up, we'll send out their contact information so you can get onto their distribution lists. The task groups themselves are open to whomever is interested, and so feel free to jump into one, two, or all. And then lastly, with questions, you're welcome to contact myself. We're also working very collaboratively with Patience Winningham Melcher, who's the Lane County Emergency Manager. And this has been a great piece of the work that the state has required to be happening, recognizing that this crisis of homelessness should be treated as an emergency. And so we're hoping to open up some type of an emergency operations center, especially to focus on addressing encampments within our community one at a time. And so Patience is going to be instrumental in helping to lift that up and take steps forward. So I'll stop there. Mayor Van Gordon.
Thank you for the presentation. Is there a link where the actual plan is online? I was looking again to kind of refresh my memory.
You know, there isn't, but we're glad to send it up again as follow-up.
Yeah, okay. So the other question that I had, so when you think about, let's see, I guess I've got a couple of different layers of questions. So when you think about how the additional money is going to flow in, right, and how are we doing, how are we going to do business a little bit differently than what the COVID response was, right? Because as more money comes in, right, we're going to stand up and do a lot, like, is there a lot of additional sort of work, right? And I think there's a growing sense that, we've got to sort of just breathe with where this challenge as a community is. And what I keep listening for is the like, how, what about the service delivery model is sort of fundamentally changing? Are we just sort of taking what we have today and trying to scale it as quickly as possible?
Yeah, great question. And so regarding the service delivery model, the overarching requirements of the all-in dollars is utilizing a housing first, low barrier approach. And even within, like, across our community, this is something that we still have opportunities to do to fidelity. And so that will be a key opportunity as the dollars are flowing. And I think that the other piece is looking at, do we partner with existing programs and how can we do that as efficiently as possible, especially with emergency shelter, and not lift up something brand new. Because we know that there are, existing shelters and alternative shelters that can, add a few beds, and that can be done much more quickly. And then on the prevention side, we have had significant rent assistance dollars flowing through the community. And so we'll be able to capitalize on that, especially because many of the dollars will be ending on June 30th. And so that can kind of transition into its place, and it's actually less money. And then with rehousing, it's also about, how do we marry with what we're doing, but also work to do it with greater fidelity to the models. And the technical assistance providers will be instrumental in helping us do that. They have been, really, really good at listening to, the challenges that communities are facing, but also helping to reframe and think about, what can be done differently, and how can we really work to mitigate, all the challenges that coming up with rapid rehousing, for example, which really is a challenge in our community.
Okay, so one comment that I keep looking for, right, like, and again, I don't know that much about other people's programs, but Lane County always feels like a particularly complex system, and that we continue to sort of grow and make more complicated. And, I can tell that because oftentimes we want to hire more housing navigators instead of sort of fixing the broader system. And so one of the things I keep reading for and listening for is like that moment when we say, okay, how do we sort of streamline what we're actually doing to make it more effective? And I don't necessarily need a response to that one. The other comment that I had was in the MAC groups themselves. Did you invite anybody from the city of Springfield?
Yes.
Okay. Can you maybe get back to me, because I didn't see them on the list?
Sure.
And then what about public safety folks? Like, is that in here in some facet at some point too?
So they're not, they were not a part of the recommended entities for the MAC group.
And I'm gonna like defer to my other colleagues here. I would be like, as we're doing this for the long term, I would be maybe interested in figuring out the right way to sort of engage with them, because in a lot of ways this has got to be like, there's a bunch of different paths that we're trying to work all at the same time, to make sure that we got everything moving the right way.
And Mayor Van Gordon, if I may add to the response on that, specifically regarding public safety, I meet weekly with the Measure 110 group, which is helping Rep. Noss and his committee develop enabling legislation for 110. The discussion came up regarding adding public safety to the working groups, specifically sheriff's departments or potentially district attorney's office, to the working groups on Measure 110, and the group categorically rejected that. So it is I don't know what it is that's causing the rejection of public safety regarding housing and behavioral health issues, when we all know the very critical role public safety plays in that. It's not something that originates, the genesis of that is not here at Lane County.
Okay, well, and I didn't think that, I didn't think that it was, but I think as we sort of are moving, like this conversation is going to take a couple iterations before it's going to get going all the way forward. But I think that's a really interesting piece of context you had, Pat.
Mayor Vinnis?
Yeah, thank you so much. I just appreciate how much work this takes and how tight your timeline was and how complicated it is. And so I'm struggling a little bit to catch up with some of this, but so the first thing is, well, maybe going backwards. Well, let me ask you one thing. So when they approve the plan, they are approving our targets, who we're serving and how we're proposing to serve them. They're not approving the money yet because they don't know what money they've got, right? I mean, the legislature still has to sign off on the funds. Is that right?
It's a good question. I've been led to believe that they will give us the dollar figure based on the $130,000 being approved.
Okay.
And I will learn right along with you if that does happen.
Okay. Okay. So then the second question, and it's connecting something you said at the beginning and something you said at the very end, is that, so the timeline is that we would get the money pretty quickly, May or June or something like that. June, I guess, or July, and we have 6 months to spend it. Am I right? that these goals have to be accomplished in 6 months.
So according to the state's timeline, Lane County should be able to access the dollars in April.
Oh.
Again, this is just the best guess. And Lane County seeks to move as quickly as possible. And so really hoping to have agreements in place by June at the very latest. And so, that 7 months, let's say, but you're correct. The emergency dollars through All In would need to be spent by January 31 of 2024.
And so we're proposing to create 230 shelter beds in that 6 or 7 months.
And so
our plan. And those are separate. When you said the governor doesn't count moving unsheltered people into shelter beds, as you made this comment about that it doesn't count if they've moved into shelter beds, they have to move into permanent supportive housing in order to be, I'm confusing the categories of when it's an outcome that's really emergency shelter and when it's an outcome that's considered housing.
We may have lost the room, Lucy. I still hear you.
I think we did lose the room there. It was dead silence. It was the question that killed. I asked the question that killed the conversation.
Maybe we can all take over.
It's really it's challenging. This really even sort of understanding how this plan works.
But I do think, yeah, you're confusing the two different categories.
They're two different categories.
What I understand is that moving someone from a alternate shelter that doesn't meet the definition into a shelter that does meet the standard for the 600 beds.
Right.
And then for the housing, it would be similar. If someone is in a transitional, are they back? If someone is in a transitional housing program, they are housed. So I guess moving them into permanent housing may not qualify. I'm not.
Yeah, it's the move along that's confusing. If we get them into emergency shelter, then that's where it gets confusing.
And Kate is in mid-response on that.
Oh, you're back.
I would agree with your comment, Dan. And I think that we want to approach each outcome a bit independently. And so within the emergency shelter outcome, 115 of those 230 beds are meant to just be improving the alternative shelters.
Gotcha.
Which strategically should be much more efficient than creating more beds.
Right. Okay. That makes sense to me. And then when you said at the end, sorry, and then I'll stop. When you said at the end that your focus will be to address encampments, given the governor's priority on moving people from encampments into housing as opposed to moving them into shelter, I'm just wondering how you're seeing that.
So really looking at what options might be available to those in encampments. There are some people where, they may just need diversion assistance, last month's rent. Others where, we might be able to get them into a rapid rehousing program and get them permanently housed. And then others where emergency shelter is the only or best option. And we'll do that. It just won't actually count toward the rehousing outcome. But that's okay. I mean, our focus is on people. It's not on, meeting the outcomes at all costs. And this will be new. And so I think we've got some really positive models, in other areas, and we'll see what is possible. And having these new rehousing resources will help. So at least we have dedicated resources to help move folks who are in kind of that targeted encampment.
And then once they're moved, on by January 1st, or January 30th. So then when we look in 2024, presumably the governor is going to make some funding available to help then support all these new shelter and housing options that we've created.
We certainly hope so.
Thank you.
And in the interest of a full agenda, and pardon me for truncating this particular discussion because this is rich. We do have a number of other items to attend to before 1:30. I'd love to adjourn this meeting on time. So are there any quick and hard questions for Kate and or anyone else? And I see Dan Bryant's hand raised for that.
Yeah, and I also have to run to another meeting, so I'll be really quick. One, I just noted a real concern about whether or not pallet shelters meet that definition because they're really not insulated, but that's another topic. But two, I'm a little concerned about the ratio in terms of the 115 and the number of respite beds. I think was 12 or 16. I'm just concerned whether for my money, I'd put more into respite because that's such a high need. So just curious how you determined that. And then lastly, how are you going to determine, given the fact that we have more than 115 of the alternate spaces that don't meet the definition, how are you determine which of those get upgraded?
Those are great questions, Dan. As far as the plan goes, that was the MAC group pulling together that information and agreeing upon those numbers. And as far as making the decisions as to who is funded, still working on that internally within the county, and how to do, whether it's a request for proposal process or something similar in the most efficient way possible, recognizing we don't want to, hold ourselves up, but also that the need or just the opportunities to support different alternative shelters is bigger than the dollars that we have available. So we need to do something that was able to result in a process to decide who is funded.
Thank you, Dan. Terry Shea, is that correct?
Yeah, that's how you pronounce my last name. I just had a quick question. If the goal is really to move folks from encampments into into emergency shelters, are we able to have conversations with public safety like Eugene Police Department and Springfield Police Department about minimizing sweeping if we have the prospect of getting folks into shelter and housing? I manage a pretty comprehensive street outreach team, and something that we run into a lot is not being able to find folks. We're in the process of, getting them into shelter or getting them squared away into potential housing because their encampment has been swept. So I'm wondering if that could be a conversation on the table if we're going to funnel more resources into that space. And I think it will further allow us to build rapport as service providers with those folks.
Thanks, Terry. You're not the first person to bring this to the table, and certainly have already started kind of thinking who needs to come to the table. Please connect with James, who will be, helping to spearhead this effort to make sure that your point continues to be worked through.
Well, thank you, Kate, but for a lively conversation. There is much more to come on this because we really are the kind of the pencil point of the work on this. And we're all involved, everybody's involved in making the most of the resources that will be available to us. Will really be a focal point of the Poverty and Homelessness Board as we move forward. So thank you for the discussion. I'd like to remind everybody as we move forward that this meeting is streamed live on Metro TV. Lane County has budgeted for all Poverty and Homelessness Board meetings to be streamed live, and it will be rebroadcast on a certain schedule. Moving down the agenda, next item on today's agenda but it is the jurisdictional updates. And I'll call on Cottage Grove first. And I believe that Councillor Fleck is with us.
Yes, thank you, Pat. There's no update from us at this point. Sorry about the video, having some bandwidth issues.
Thank you, Councillor. From Eugene, I'll look to Mayor Vinnes.
I don't need to take time today. We're continuing to work on standing up the Rosa at Chase Gardens, and hopefully I'll have news of that next time. I'll leave it to others to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Venus. Then move to Springfield and call on Mayor Van Gordon.
Yeah, so I guess a couple of quick updates. We're in the middle of updating our camping ordinance to comply with the Boise v. Martin the decision. We put up a survey. I think it either went up an hour ago or this morning, soliciting public input. One of the places that will hit that survey will hit will be the providers that are on this call to sort of provide us some sort of feedback as we go through that process the next couple of weeks. And then in the when Mayor Venus and I were on the Home Consortium, probably, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, we did vote to approve funding for new housing developments. For Springfield, it was Cornerstone Community Housing, that was out, in my neck of the woods, to build additional homes. So it's always good to get those home dollars out the door so we can start solving this problem.
Thank you, Mayor Van Gordon. And then I have listed here Eugene Chamber of Commerce work groups. Is there anyone from any of those work groups, or Chair Quick Warner, are you still with us? I'm hearing no groundswell of response.
I'm not seeing anybody.
So I believe we'll move directly along to other communities who are with us. Anybody from any other community? I'm not going to say just cities and districts, but is anybody else from a particular work group that would like to add an update at this point in time? And I'm seeing nothing there.
Mr. Chair.
Chris McAllister, Vice Chair McAllister.
Yes, sir. I just want to share that the Healthcare Committee is going to be going into its retreat tomorrow. So we hope to have some advisement and sharing of new ideas and what we've been working on afterwards.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. McAllister. And then, I see that Catherine Ryan is here. Catherine Ryan, is there anything that you'd like to outline that's happening on the CCO front?
I think not anything super big. I think maybe just that was a funny thing to say. There is big stuff coming starting next month. Folks who are currently on Medicaid and have not been rolled off for the last 3 years, that process is going to start. So if you are someone who works with folks who are on OHP, there's a number of resources available, Pacific Sources kind of pulling together some FAQ type things for community partners, just to make sure that everyone is sort of prepared, knows what the process is going to look like, and how it's going to work. It's going to be it's like a 16-month process to get through everyone in the state. So it's sort of this, it's a little bit of a hurry up and wait, I think, of wanting to make sure that folks know what's going on, but recognizing that for any individual OHP member, there's going to be a pretty small window in that time that it's actually affecting them. So kind of a heads up for now. Please, folks, feel free to reach out to me if you kind of want more information or want to understand sort of role of your organization as we go through that process.
Thank you, Catherine, for that update. And I love seeing the coordination that I see occurring between our two CCOs that we have here in Lane County. A lot of positive work happening on that front. Then the final jurisdictional update is Lane County. I'm not going to say very much about what's happening in Lane County because a lot of the things that we're doing really aren't pertinent to what happens in this room. And a lot of things that we're doing seem important sometimes to us and are less important to people who are watching from any distance at all. One thing that did happen this week is there was a discussion regarding the recent redistricting of county commissioners. The decision was made this week that we will not look at redistricting county commissioners. That was turned out to be a 1-0 vote. If you watch the replay on that, and the 1-0 vote was my vote only on that one. Nobody else cared to vote, so we're not looking at redistricting. Nobody's interested in that. Then the other thing I'll mention is that we are closely keeping track of Measure 110, and I personally have been weekly attending a work group in Salem. I missed the one today. I'm here today. That work group is Representative Noss, who's the chair of, I'm not sure what the committee does, Health and Human Services maybe, and he's working on the enabling legislation. And it's a large work group that is working on that. I kind of hinted at that in my response to Mayor Van Gordon not so long ago. moving the ball forward on things that are important for the legislature to consider, but also counties are present, cities are present, and many of the different boots on the ground players are present. It's been really interesting to watch the Secretary of State's input based on the audit that was released late last year and has been worked through by the work group and will be worked through in the legislature. A lot of good stuff happening there, and I anticipate Measure 110 actually flowing in a way that that really does benefit right down to the grassroots level here in Oregon. Lane County has burns set up, established, excuse me, that you probably all know some of the burns. Many counties applied for and were granted actually being a burn as the county or one of the county's agencies. Lane County was not selected as a burn. So our burns include grassroots, boots on the ground organizations like Community Outreach Through Radical Empowerment. I'm going to name a few here. South Lane Mental Health Services, Center for Family Development, Laurel Hill Center, Looking Glass and Shelter Care, Transponder, Veterans Legacy, and Central Latino and HIV Alliance. Other members are receiving money directly for their direct work. And it really, through my lens that I'm looking through, it's working. We're getting money right to the place where it needs to be, not slowed down, but right to the point of the action. So with that, we'll move down the agenda with no other comments from jurisdictions. And we'll move to item 6 on the agenda, which is a system performance measures update. And with us today, we have Marley Walker.
We'll see if I can get this. Won't be able to monitor the chat anymore. I will. Thank you. So I might not be the most number heavy person today, but I will probably be the most acronym heavy person today. HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System, which holds all of our county funded projects, COC funded projects, and many, many more, including burn funded projects in some cases. We submit a few reports to HUD every year, and these happened a while ago. There's been other important things on the agenda. So one we submit is the longitudinal system analysis.
There's no direction, but in the end, we didn't receive any direction.
Someone could mute their mic if they wish. Okay, thank you.
I have the mute button, so I feel very powerful right now. Let's see. I just want to make sure I didn't accidentally pin someone that I totally did. So let me undo that. LSA, the longitudinal system analysis. This might be interesting to you. This might be a little bit boring, but we submit a bunch of data. We clean a ton of data, which means we had like 3 months long conversations with many of the providers to get things exactly the way HUD loves to see them. And then if our data is considered to be usable, which it was, I feel like we need a better title for that, but they like it. And so we were included in the report to Congress, which is called the AHAR. We also, as part of this submission process, get some visualizations through what we call Stella. I've got 42 pages of them, but only like 3 slides of them today because it's a lot. This report only includes emergency shelter, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. So I feel like we all got a really good primer today on what alternative shelter is and what emergency shelter is. So this is really limited in terms of, it's not everything in our system. The goal of this report is to say, like, how is our system functioning for different household types? The thing that I would just keep in mind for this report and the other is when we're talking about our system, usually when you hear from me, like our system is everything that we're doing and all of these alternative shelters and all of the, our system is quite robust and we have a lot going on. But in this case, when HUD means system, they mean these specific project types. So it's much more limited. And that's also true for the system performance measures, which is another HMIS report that's due slightly later. They have like 7 metrics and then some sub-metrics, and they just ask like how many people meet this definition essentially. And the goal of this is, does our COC meet the needs of people who are experiencing homelessness? Neither of these reports include all of our projects, and I understand that this is frustrating. because we want to think about our whole system, and that's how we're used to talking about it. But also, when we submit this to HUD and every other COC submits things to HUD, we're all submitting the same project types. So just because we're amazing and have our food pantries reported, and maybe they're not great at housing people, we wouldn't expect that, right? And so it's more of an apples to apples comparison. This is for the federal fiscal year, so we're already like 6 months past, but I think still really helpful. And I've kind of mixed some of this stuff together because it is based on the same period of time. I don't know where one of my bullet points disappeared, but the SPMs, the system performance measures, are based on individuals. The LSA is based on households. So we have to do a little bit of switching, but it's not that this information can't be helpful. I think it is really helpful, and just want to make sure that we're clear on like who it considers. Also in my missing bullet point, I don't know where this mystery item went, but the SPMs include one other project type, which is street outreach. So we do get a little bit more information that way. But, oh, there it is. I don't know why it's there at the end. I wanted to talk about SPMs first because there's no visualizations there. And so I think this is a little more dry. But here I have all 7 metrics and submeasures and exactly how we've done in the last 4 years. I just wanted to show a few that I think will pop out at folks. The first is that the number of days people in shelter and transitional housing, the number of days they've spent homeless, has gotten better. So shorter episodes of homelessness than in prior years. Another item, which is if we include then also people in permanent housing, that number has gotten worse. And there are a variety of reasons that could be true. One of them could certainly be how long it takes for us to find housing placements in the community for rapid rehousing providers. So, you know, if you know anyone who has tried to find a new rental recently, I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. And when you look at the period of time that folks have spent homeless, it is a little bit longer, but I think that could definitely be a factor. So we're doing better on the just emergency shelter side, and it takes a little bit longer for folks in permanent housing. Some other goals that we have, let me make sure. Yeah. Reducing the number of people in shelter. We have gotten worse, like more people have been in shelter. But also when you think about the last few years, there was definitely a period of time where we didn't have shelter space, like it was reduced. And also we keep talking about how we need more shelter space. And so while this is HUD's goal, is that we reduce the number of people in shelter. If we didn't have enough shelter to begin with, this might not be a bad thing. Like I put the down arrow because it is worse according to this goal. But just kind of thinking about local context and what our goals are, that might not necessarily be a problem. We've had a lot more funding this year. And so, and we opened, you know, the navigation center, Schenkel, we've opened some different shelters. That might not be actually a problem. And it's not that different from our 2019 year. Another goal is to decrease the number of people who become homeless for the first time. And this is not an accurate measure for us because they just look at how many people who come into shelter weren't in shelter in the 2 years before that. And we know there's a lot of folks who are houseless for a long time, but might not go into that shelter system. So we went, this number of people who became homeless for the first time, quote unquote, has gone up significantly. But same thing, if you look up, I keep getting mixed up about which mouse I have, but if you look up at that goal right above it, we put more people in shelter. So of course, the number of people who entered shelter and hadn't been there for a while, when we didn't have as many shelter beds available in the years previous, this is going to go up. So I'm not saying it's not a problem, but there are certainly some mitigating factors I think we've experienced. I've got one more spreadsheet item, and that is the number of people in street outreach who exited to permanent housing is up a lot. And I'm sure some of the folks on the call have experience with this and a lot of thoughts about this, but we have way more street outreach projects than we've had in the past. And the quality of those, you know, has definitely increased, and folks are working really hard. This is really cool, I think. And we're doing a great job. The percentage of people who were in shelter or permanent housing and exited to permanent housing is down. But we kind of returned to 2019, 2020. 2021 was a very successful year. And we've kind of like returned to those previous numbers. So I've got every goal. If folks are interested, I can send those out, but these I think are the main highlights.
Thank you, Carly, for the presentation. I'll open it for quick questions. We're just about on time right now. Cool. So if we have any quick questions, I'll ask for those at this point in time, but I encourage written questions perhaps to be sent directly to Carly or through Kate, but to Carly.
Yeah, I have some more visualization that I can show another time. But one I just get asked about a lot, so I wanted folks to know I have it if you want it, which is the big map of where folks traveled through the system this year. I have a lot more of these, and we could filter by all sorts of household types and pathways. So if there's any specific requests, I can definitely get those to you, or I can come back in another meeting.
Thank you, Carly. Is any of this available online, should people wish to look at it? None of this is available online. Yeah. So if Carly, you have the slides from today's presentation. Is that something you could distribute to the committee? Thank you very much. So look for that in your email, the slides from today's committee. And please, any questions you have, please forward them directly to Carly or through Kate.
Yeah, I see Mayor Van Gordon had a question. I'm happy to take, I'm happy to take a ton, but we have time for one.
Could you do this geographically?
That is a wonderful question, and the answer is no.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just, especially with Springfield, Eugene, that's a really tricky one. I do have this for different household types. So like adult only versus adult and children versus child only. And I also have some good stuff in terms of like the different pathways folks went to. So if people go to shelter only, to transitional housing only, I'm looking to see if I have some of this in here. I don't have any geographic stuff, but I can definitely pull it. My memory is that 97% of clients are from cities. 3% are from rural, and none of our geographic area is considered to be urban. So they go based on zip code, and they don't let us really filter in that way.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Thank you very much, everyone. And once again, written questions, please forward them to directly through Carly or through Kate, but to Carly. We'll move down our agenda. We have our next presentation is on the community needs analysis, an update from Brianna Rogers.
Yes, and thank you, Chair. Diana, if you could share that PDF, sharing back to Diana, and I can start talking about it while that gets pulled up. So in 2023, Lane County released our new community needs assessment. So it's been open for, community needs survey. It's been open for about 2 weeks now. Prior to that release, an ad hoc committee was, thank you, Diana, an ad hoc committee was assembled to review and provide feedback on the questions and the formatting of the survey. And then it was released. As a quick reminder, this survey is a requirement of the Community Action Agency, and it's used to create our community needs assessment, which will then inform the full PHB board and our strategic plan and our funding priorities for the next couple years. The last survey and assessment were completed in 2019, and this one is going to be completed late summer, early fall of this year, 2023. It's meant for all members of the community to take, but we are focused on highlighting voices from low-income households and those folks who are accessing public services. So far, a large chunk of the survey takers were done in that first week when it was released, and then it's tapered off a bit. We have right now, just checked, just over 300 surveys completed online in English, and then about 10 in Spanish. And those are just online surveys. The paper surveys have been distributed to housing programs, service centers, youth services, and posted on a number of bulletin boards throughout the community. Also provided through street outreach teams to different programs as well. So it is getting out there slowly. Lots of email blasts as well to folks. The survey is open until April 30th and can be accessed online or by contacting me and receiving a paper survey. And then Diana, if you can scroll down just a little bit. We're gonna do an activity today, which is everyone take out your phones. I can see everyone here in the room, so I know if you're not doing it. Everyone online, also take out your phone. Scan one of the codes. There is English, Spanish, and Chinese available as languages. Go ahead and scan one, whichever one you choose. If you have not taken the survey yourself as a participant in this room or online, save this for later and take it after. It'll take about 15 minutes to do. So save it for later. If you have taken it, please send it to one person in your contact list. That is your homework.
Look at that, it's right there.
There you go.
I have no excuse.
Exactly. So I'm hearing that you haven't taken it yet. So please get those out widely, distribute it. Like I said, we do want to get those folks who are low-income households or accessing services, but as community service providers, please take it yourself. It is pretty lengthy. I understand that, but it really does help inform our services and our strategic plan and where this funding is going. So please pass it widely.
Thank you, Brianna. Any questions for Brianna other than when do you need these? And I think the answer is by 5 o'clock today.
April 30th is the deadline. End of day, April 30th.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Then we'll move on down the agenda. We're getting to end game. If you're playing chess, you know what that means. We'll look at the next all-member meeting. The next all-member meeting is on April 20th, 2023. And if you have your agenda in front of you, this is what's been presented so far as the draft agenda for the upcoming meeting. Without changes or recommendations from the members of the executive committee, this is how it will go forward. If you have any suggestions right now, feel free to voice them. If you develop any suggestions in the next 2 or 3 business days, then please forward those to Kate Budd. So as of right now, the all member agenda is in bullet points, all in Lane County, the updated coordinated entry web page, looking forward to that. Unite Us presentation, a severe weather update, diversion update, and COC application debrief. Any questions or any comments regarding that draft agenda? Mayor Vinus.
Yeah, thanks. I just don't know what Unite Us is.
Then in my poor words, I'll say this. Kate, could you tell us?
Sure. And so it's a platform that is used to help connect folks who are in need with providers who can serve a need. And so in an ideal world, maybe someone would present at DHS as needing a food box. And so then DHS would put into the Unite Us system that so-and-so is going to be going to Lane, Food for Lane County type of program. And it's more of a direct referral connection, and actually something that we're using newly as a part of the diversion program through coordinated entry. So it's hoping to grow in greater use in the community. So wanted to make sure that this group is aware of its capabilities.
Does that cover your question, Mayor Vinus? Then I'll ask this, is that something that people can access online or get a little bit more information online?
It is, they have a website, yes.
And it's Unite Us, just plain Unite Us. And I'm testing that.
And maybe Connect Us Oregon or something.
Visit our website, it's right there. Yep, that's it. Unite Us, Google, visit our website, it's right there. Thank you, Kate.
Yes. Looks like Chris has a question.
And Vice Chair McAllister.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is all awesome work and things that we're advancing on. Can we get an update on the Navigation Center and the Brooklyn Street Shelter and how that's going?
I think we could probably shoehorn that in.
Awesome.
Yes, and Chris, let me see that if not, April, then definitely June at the latest, just depending on how the reporting falls.
Of course.
And if there's anything very substantive to report on that, Chris, I think right now we're in the kind of march in place, waiting for the orders, the whistle to move forward. Okay, further comments, questions?
Looks like Bob has one.
Bob Teeter, please.
I was just going to comment on the Unite Us or Connect Oregon. It works well for the urban areas, does not work well for the rural areas. A lot of times what happens is our experience has been a lot of the DHS or people that are utilizing it don't look thoroughly through what maybe the areas they're serving. We've got referrals from all over the state for serving people that aren't in our service area. And so we didn't have really any referrals that qualified. And we just had a lot that were coming in from the Portland area. And so those, I'm just kind of throwing out a warning, those that are using that, read through it carefully instead of just checking boxes and just running with it. Just kind of looking through when you're making those referrals a little more thoroughly.
And you know, Bob, thanks for the rural perspective on that, because quite often we do things with a metropolitan area centric lens, and hearing from the rural areas, whether it be mobile crisis response, whatever it may be, quite often we just forget that the rural area exists. And you know, in Lane County, about 30% of the people in Lane County live outside of the urban growth boundaries. So thank you. Then last item on today's agenda is just a review of next week's meeting, the next meetings. We meet April 20th, 2023. So at this point in time, that meeting is an in-person / hybrid meeting scheduled to be in Harris Hall. These meetings, that when we go in person on these meetings, they typically, in fact, exclusively have to be someplace where Metro TV has access. Harris Hall is such a place. It's not the best place for a meeting. The BCC conference room and also the Ruth Bascom Tyson room at the library. There are other places that do have access, and I think Kate is doing her hardest to scramble to find places for this meeting to occur.
Indeed. You know, we appreciate your flexibility, especially those who are attending in person. I can say that I think we're going to likely continue through this year in Harris Hall, in that we've figured out the hybrid of it. And that often is the most challenging piece. And then also we'll likely continue here in the training room at the housing office. So I'm glad to finally square things away, but appreciate your patience as we kind of jumped from different training room to training room.
And thank you for, once again, for not your patience, but your perseverance. Our next executive committee meeting is May 18th, 2023 in a place to be determined. With that, without further business for today's agenda, on time, might I add, we are adjourned.